Hey, what's going on, guys? Me, Mr. Miles again, and I want to start by telling a story that took place about 3 years ago. I was working at a summer camp that I've talked about before, I think, and I was in Browns Flat, New Brunswick, Canada. So in other words, the middle of nowhere. So anyways, this summer camp, we had kids ranging from ages 5 to 17 come week after week throughout the summer. They would come and hang out, have fun, and learn about Jesus, and it was just a great place. And one of the things we did there that was so fun was something called counselor dress up. Now essentially how this worked was that the different counselors along with their campers would dress up according to a certain theme, be it music, movies, video games, whatever. They would dress up according to that theme, and depending on how good their dress up was, how good their costume was, they could win points for their team, which could lead to them getting a prize at the end of the week. Now the prize wasn't anything major, it was just like a pizza party or something, just some kind of incentive, but that didn't stop the counselors from taking these dress ups extremely seriously, like way too seriously. Despite the fact that these counselors were already so busy that they had basically no time to make them and almost no resources, they made so many insane costumes with what they had because they just put so much effort into them. Back when I was a counselor, I actually made an entire suit of Iron Man armor out of cardboard. I mean, it wasn't that great, but I was pretty proud of it. But other counselors took this so much further than I did, way too far. Some of them would shave their head for a dress up. One guy even literally set himself on fire for a dress up. It got way too out of hand, to the point where counselors were burning themselves out, no pun intended, and were exhausted all of the time because all the time they were supposed to use to rest was going into making these costumes. So we then, the head staff, recognized this problem and decided we need to make a change. These counselors need to start using their breaks actually as breaks. So we implemented a rule that these counselors, instead of spending all their time making these costumes, had to use their break time to rest, like what it was actually there for. We thought it was going to go great. We were proud of this new rule, but in the first week we had implemented it, a counselor already broke it. And it was just so weird to us because this rule, while it was technically a restriction, was for their benefit and it was supposed to help them and empower them in the long run. So I was frustrated, but I was also scared at the same time that this entire system was going to fall apart right away and that all of the counselors were going to go back to being burned out. And so since I was the head counselor, I was the boss of the counselors essentially, it was my responsibility to go and talk to him, have the hard conversation, scold him and discipline him and tell him he couldn't keep doing that. Now that might not sound so bad, it might not sound like such a hard thing to just go and have a tough conversation, but something you should know about me at the time was I was awful at conflict. I loathed it. It was the worst thing in the world for me. I would always avoid conflict at every turn if I could. I'm much better now. Back then, the idea of doing this legitimately terrified me. But I did it anyway because I knew I had to. I went, I talked to him, I told him that he couldn't keep doing that and why, and he took it pretty well. He apologized, and that was that. But despite how smoothly it seemed to go, I still hated every second of it. It still hurts me now to think about when I had to do it. I was walking away from that conversation just feeling so awful inside, even though I knew I did a good thing. And it was a good thing because that preserved that important rule, and to this day, 3 years later, that is still an upstanding rule that the counselors cannot do that on their breaks. It is still giving life and helping counselors to this day, partly because I just had that one tough conversation. It would have been really easy for me to just ignore this problem and just hope that it would have worked out in the end. It would have made it easier for me, it would have made it easier for the counselor I had to talk to, but it wouldn't have been best in the long run. And it wouldn't have been the loving thing to do. Because I actually cared about this counselor and the rest of them, the most loving thing to do was to have that tough conversation. And that is our subject today. How we need to be people who love others, not be people who just please others. Our scripture this week comes from Galatians 1, verses 6 to 12, and I'm going to be reading in the New International Version, and it goes like this. I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, so now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. So this is the opening of a letter that Paul wrote to the Galatians, and he wrote it to them because he was frustrated with them. They had been going away from the teachings that Jesus taught and that Paul had brought them, and they had started believing in other things. They had started detracting from the truth. So in this book, Paul starts trying to call them back to the truth and back to what he stated originally. And he says that they can trust him because his words are not his own. He is not speaking from himself, he's speaking words from God. And that he's not trying to please people, he is speaking in order to please God. And that's why he can be trusted. And the reason why that's important is because Paul then goes on to say, as we just read, if I were trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Whew. Very heavy. You see, Paul wrote this letter to the people in Galatia, not because it was easy, not because it was going to please him to do so or please them, but because he believed in God's truth and because he loved the people in Galatia. Paul knew what was right, what was good, and what would be best for them. And because he cared and loved them so much, he had to write this letter to them, even if it was tough, because he wanted what was best for them. Paul here models our main point today, which is that we need to be people lovers, not people pleasers. And yes, there is a huge difference. You see, everybody has the desire and wants to be accepted. They want to have a place, they want to be brought in. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to just be agreeable, to not offend anybody, to just say things people want to hear, do things that they want you to do. And there's nothing wrong with wanting people to like you. You shouldn't want to be rejected. You shouldn't want people to dislike you. But the problem is when our priority becomes just getting people to like us, rather than doing and saying what is best for them. And this is where that difference between pleasing people and loving people comes in. You see, a people pleaser, again, is somebody who will just say whatever somebody wants to hear and will just do whatever it is that person wants them to do just to please them. But the problem is that that's actually selfish. A people pleaser is actually focused on themselves. They're not actually at all concerned with the well-being of the other person. But somebody who is concerned with that is a people lover. A people lover is somebody who says what a person needs to hear and does for a person what they need to be done for them, even if they don't necessarily appreciate it in that moment. They might get mad, they might reject you, they might deny it, but that is the risk a people lover is willing to take because they care more about that person than how they feel. If it means doing what's best for someone, then they're willing to be the bad guy. Now, do not misunderstand me. This does not mean that we are not to be gentle with people. This does not mean we're not supposed to be compassionate, patient, and understanding with people when talking to them. What I do mean is that our heart, our motivation, our goal has to be on what's best for them. What is the best thing I can do for them in the long run? Not what's just going to make them happy and like me. And to illustrate this point, I have come here to the elementary school playground. At least, I think it is. Now imagine you were brought here and asked to watch over all of the elementary school kids as they're playing on these structures. Now imagine they're going around, they're having a good time, you're just sitting, watching, whatever, but then you notice that some of the kids climb all the way up here to this railing. Yeah, picture they were up here. Picture all the kids were up here, hanging off this railing, going out, standing up right on here, you know, whatever, and hanging off the side. So you see this. So what do? You're sitting there and you think, man, I don't want to have to go the whole way up there and be the bad guy and have to tell them to come down and off of that. because all the kids are going to get upset at me. They're going to think I'm lame. And also there's a lot of stairs going up there. It just sounds like a whole bad time, and they're probably going to be okay. Like, they look like they won't fall. Like, the chances are they won't, right? So would you just sit here, down here, and ignore it? Pretend like nothing's happening and just hope it goes well? No, you probably wouldn't. You would probably, I hope, go up there and grab the kids and take them off the railing and tell them, what are you doing? You could fall and break your neck if you stay up there. It's not safe at all. And yeah, maybe the kids would all get upset at you and be like, what? Come on, you're lame, you're boring. Why don't you let us have any fun? In all likelihood, they wouldn't even understand that what you're doing for them is for their own good, for their protection, so that they don't seriously injure themselves. But this can go beyond the playground. Let's take it back into the classroom. Your teachers, while being there with all you guys in the class, they could just not give any homework. They could just not give any tests. They could give you A's on everything, 100% in the class. And guess what? That would be really easy for them, and it would make all of you guys, I'm sure, very happy. So if it's easier for the teacher and they like doing it, and if it's easier for you guys and you guys are very happy and everyone's happy, then why don't teachers just do that? Why don't they just not give any work and give you A's on everything? Well, because we know that down the line, that wouldn't go well for you guys. Down the line, you guys would fall behind. And the next year, you wouldn't know anything. You wouldn't know what to do in the next class. And even if all your teachers did that, if all throughout school they just give you A's on everything, then you wouldn't have learned anything at all and wouldn't be ready to get a job, get a career. You wouldn't even know how to read or how to count. And because your teachers know that, they know what's best for you, and they care about you guys, they're willing to do the hard thing of giving you tests, of preparing lessons, of sometimes giving you bad grades so that you can learn and do better. They don't want to be the bad guy. It's not their goal. Their intent is to have a good relationship with you guys and that everybody can win. But sometimes that just won't be the case. And this applies to every relationship you will ever have, pretty nearly. Between you and your friends, you and your family, you and your siblings, and eventually you and your coworkers. It will always be easier to just say what the other person wants to hear and do what the other person wants you to do. It'll make you happy and make them happy. But that's not always what's best for them. Ask yourself next time you're talking to someone, say, is what I'm doing and saying based on what I believe to be true and what I believe to be good? Or is it just based on what the other person wants to hear? Imagine a case where your friend is coming to you and ranting and complaining about something that their sibling did, saying that their sibling did this unbelievable thing that made them so upset and they're the worst person and how could they do this, and you get the idea. But let's say that you know, either based on some context or based on you just reading between the lines a little bit, you can tell that your friend is actually the one in the wrong here. That it's not their sibling who did something wrong, it's just your friend who's in the wrong here. So what do? Well, a people pleaser would just agree with them, say, yeah, you're right, your sibling's the worst, how could they do that, and go on and agree with everything and say what they want to hear the whole time. And your friend, I'm sure, will really appreciate that. I'm sure that would make them very happy, and what's more, it'd be so much easier for you. You wouldn't have to have any kind of hard conversation or have any kind of a fight, and then it'd be over, it'd be done. But by doing that, you're affirming a negative, toxic, sinful thing about your friend. And you're pushing that to actually grow in that person just because you didn't want to have to point it out. But then a people lover, on the other hand, would gently start to prod and ask questions and try to get their friend to understand that maybe it's not their sibling who's in the wrong. Maybe it is them. Gently and understandably try to get them to that place and help them understand that. Or maybe, if you have to, even be blunt about it and say, no, it's not your sibling. You're the one who's actually in the wrong here. And maybe that could go pretty okay. They'd be like, okay, whatever, I guess you're right. Or maybe they could be really mad and maybe they could blow up at you. That's totally possible. But even if it doesn't turn out too well for us, we can have peace and joy knowing that this is the best thing for them. And down the road, this will help your friend grow. And hopefully one day they will thank you and understand that. Because again, if we truly believe in God's truth and love the people around us, then we need to bring that truth to the people around us. And while doing that can be hard, awkward, and sometimes messy, it is nonetheless necessary. Because a people pleaser is selfish. They only care about themselves, what's best for them, and what's going to be easiest for them. But a people lover is just that, loving. They care about what's best for others and is willing to do the hard thing for the benefit of the people they care about. And just as Paul says, if we're focusing on pleasing others, then we're not being a servant of God. So the next time you're in a situation with a friend, family, or whoever, and you know what that person needs to hear or what you need to do for them, even if it's hard, I encourage you to just do it or say it. I'm not telling you to be rude and blunt and just throw truth in their face, but you still need to do and say the hard thing. And in the end, even if it's hard and doesn't go the way you hope, you will be happy you did it. And it will turn out the best scenario in the long run. Just like how when I had the hard conversation with the counselor about the rule with the dress up. If I didn't have that conversation, counselors would still be wasting their breaks making these ridiculous costumes and burning themselves out today. But because I did the hard thing and talked to them and corrected him, now counselors are sleeping and taking naps and resting. And so much good has come from that simple one hard conversation. Conversations that you guys can have today with the people you love. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Chapel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of it.